So Gareth's book is called Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. Gareth is a financial journalist. That's how you got into this, and now an author. And the book has been called variously by reviewers a damning account by the Washington Post, vividly told and excellently researched by the Financial Times, and the Irish Times has called it disturbing and important. I agree with all of those things. I came to it knowing about as much about Opus Dei as you could glean from watching the movie with Tom Hanks. And I recommend it to everyone who's on here watching at this right now. But before we get into um, the machinations of this sect in Washington, and now in the Vatican. I just like to see if you could give us a little, um, just an overview of how you got interested in this topic, how you ended up putting 6 years of your life into researching it.
I mean, totally by accident. I was not looking to write a book about Opus Dei or even about the Catholic Church when I came into this. My background is I'm a financial reporter. And so basically, what happened was that a bank in Spain collapsed, and I was sent to report on the bank. And it turned out that this bank had been a cash machine for Opus Dei for decades. The group had siphoned hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, from this bank to finance its network all around the world. And so as I dug, I just basically discovered this absolutely incredible story. I mean, coming into it, Nina, I was a bit like you. I mean, I don't think I knew of Opus Dei through the Da Vinci Code. I
Hmm.
don't think at that stage I had even read the book or seen the film, but obviously it was impossible to live during that period in around 2003 without being aware of it in some way. I did read the book and watch the film as part of my research for the book. I mean, it does feature the Opus Dei response to the book features, is part of my book. Um, but yeah, it was an accidental find, um, and sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. That's certainly what I found. The Opus Dei that I discovered was far more shocking and far more, I guess, scary, for want of a better word, than the one depicted in the Dan Brown novel.
Most people who saw the movie and have read the book are aware of the really lurid, allegations, I guess, about the self-flagellation and the wearing the spiked garter and the general kind of sense of abuse that the members are willing to undergo. Talk to me a little bit about that. Finding out that that was actually true, but also the larger issue of how they treat their members and their numeraries and supernumeraries, as they're called, these people that they bring into the cult. And also, can we call it a cult?
Oh,
Sect,
I mean,
cult, what words are we using here?
I think Opus Dei's lawyers would probably take issue with me calling it a cult, but I have absolutely no kind of misconception. This is an abusive cult at the heart of the Catholic Church, and I believe that before his death, and this is something maybe we can talk about a little bit later. Before his death, Francis was intent on cleaning up this organization and cleansing the church of the abuses of Opus Dei. Um, so yes, without a doubt. But so you're right in pointing to this tradition of corporal mortification that exists within Opus Dei. There are two things. One is the Silis, which is kind of like a spiked, barbed chain that they wear around their thighs. They Numeri members, the kind of elite members, are meant to wear this for 2 hours every day, and it's supposed
For,
to remind
for
them of
10 hours or two
sorry,
hours?
2 hours, 2
Two
hours.
hours. Okay.
and it's it's supposed to remind them of the suffering of Christ. And then once a week they use this thing called the discipline, which is basically a whip. So they take off their shirts, and they whip themselves over their shoulders, again to remind themselves of the suffering of Christ. Now, Opus Dei over the years hasn't really, I mean, it doesn't publicize this kind of activity, but it hasn't really hidden it either. I think, through Dan Brown's novel, and even on I think the Opus Dei website even talks about that stuff. For me, the there was much worse stuff that I discovered. I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
it
Talk
turned
to us
out that,
about that.
yeah, I mean, it turned out that the group was stroke is involved in human trafficking, the grooming of children, forced labor, coercing people into joining. Um, I mean, you mentioned there the two different types of membership. There are the numeraries that live in gender segregated residences where every move is watched. These are the celibate members, the kind of elite members. And then there are the kind of normal, inverted commas, members who live out in the community, the married members, the supernumeraries. Now, the numeraries, I mean, the numerary ranks are just riddled with abuse. This is an organization that is deeply, it controls every element of their life, cuts them off from their families, watches them. It gets they get the numeraries to report on each other. There are horrendous levels of mental illness within the numerary ranks, and these people are often sent to Opus Dei doctors and prescribed with medication to cover up the symptoms. And so yes, I mean, so while the corporal mortification gets all the headlines, the actual, there are much more serious abuses going on within the ranks of Opus Dei, and the organization has very successfully kind of covered up that abuse for many years. But victims are now starting to come forward.
And there are lawsuits, right, in Argentina and in other. Is the Argentina one is the big one, I think, right?
Yeah, so in Argentina in 2021, I think it was 43 women came forward, and they basically alleged that they'd been targeted and groomed as kids. Opus Dei had gone out to underprivileged communities, these underprivileged villages in the Argentinian, Paraguayan countryside, and gone looking for young girls that it might use as slaves. And it told the girls and their parents, they were like 12, 13 years old. It told the girls and their parents that it was taking them to a school in Buenos Aires where they would study, they would get qualifications, and they could, they had a chance at a better life. And the girls and the parents obviously thought this was a great opportunity, and this was a Catholic organization. Why wouldn't we trust these people? Sometimes they would come to the houses with a priest. Um, so years later, many of these women have left the organization and decided to launch a suit. They filed a complaint with the Vatican. They launched a suit in Argentina. Federal prosecutors have now taken up that suit. And just last year, just days before the book came
Federal
out,
prosecutors in Argentina, not in the United States.
federal
Yeah.
prosecutors in Argentina
Yeah.
have, just days before my book came out. So we I guess, didn't call, I mean, went out on a limb is the wrong word, but we decided to call a spade, and we said this is human trafficking. And my publisher Simon and Schuster was very supportive in, obviously I had to jump through a lot of hoops and had to prove my case, but they were happy to put out this book alleging that human trafficking had taken place. But then just a few days before the book came out, federal prosecutors in Argentina formally accused Opus Dei of human trafficking and serious labor abuses. And so 4 Opus Dei priests will be going on trial in Argentina in over the next few months. But I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. In my research, I found that there were, I think, almost 100 similar schools around the world recruiting young girls in places like Kenya, the Philippines, across Latin America, even in Europe, in Belgium and France, these schools existed. And so I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a very good chance that many more hundreds, if not thousands, of victims will come forward. There is actually an excellent documentary that's now available on HBO Max in the United States called How I Left Opus Dei, and it's the story of 13 women, including some of the women from Argentina, but also from other parts of the world like Ireland, Spain, who recount being groomed and coerced into joining Opus Dei. And I would highly recommend watching it. It's a really, it's a pretty harrowing watch, but it's an important watch.
Absolutely fascinating that this goes on in the 21st century. Um, your book also, and this is what we really want to get to here, you really did dug into the effort that this cult sect has made since its origins in the very beginning in the 19, I guess, 20s in Portugal, um, to infiltrate power structures, right? In at the very top of these countries, and to be it's a global organization. We see what you've talked about Argentina here a lot because this is where this lawsuit is happening. But talk to us a little bit about the effort that they made, the targeting really of leaders in Washington, beginning, I guess, in the 80s. But can you just sort of lay that out from, let's go from McCloskey to Leonard Leo and the Supreme Court, and just lay that out for the listeners in a sort of brief as a fashion as possible, because I want to get to some other things as well.
Yeah, well,
I've written about this stuff on this in the Substack, but I want to hear it from you, like this sort of why were
yeah,
they doing it,
no,
and
absolutely.
what
I mean, I think first, sorry to not keep this too brief, but I think a slight tangent. It's important to remind people that so when Opus Dei was created in the early 1930s, this was a country on the brink of civil war. Basic progressives and conservatives were at war. They were literally fighting in the streets. And Escrivá, the founder of Opus Dei,
Portugal? Yeah,
sorry, it's Spain,
it's
sorry,
Portugal. Yeah.
and they were and Escrivá, the founder of Opus Dei, was horrified at what he saw, and he took this organization and he, I mean, I'm not making this up. These are secret documents that were remain hidden from the Vatican. They've been hidden for almost 100 years. They were secreted out by former members, and I got my hands on them. But in his foundational documents, Escrivá basically wrote how he saw the membership as this guerrilla army who would infiltrate every element of society, from politics to business, the judiciary, and use their positions there to, in inverted commas, re-Christianize society. So he saw Opus Dei, on the face of it, this is just a Catholic organization that gives spiritual guidance or whatever. But deep down, this is a deeply progressive, reactionary movement that's fighting against all the kind of progressive forces in society. He was obsessed with, he thought that the Bolsheviks, the communists, the Jews, they had taken over the levers of society. And they were basically kind of running Spain into the ground. I mean, the parallels to today are tremendous. I mean, that's the narrative that's being pushed by the current administration, that the liberals, the progressives, have taken over government and education, universities and business, and it's our job to fight back. That's what Opus Dei has been doing for 100 years. And to come back to your question, sorry for going on, but like
No,
to come back,
they needed that background because it's a completely regressive um, operation. And then they target, as you say, they targeted these power structures in order to re-Christianize the society.
yeah, so unlike the rest of the Catholic Church, which is open to anyone that's interested, Opus Dei is by invitation only. You can't go onto the website and say, I want to become a member. They target you, and they very much go after people who are in positions of power. In the United States, there are about 3,000 members, and about a quarter of them are concentrated in the Washington, D.C. area. And that tells you all you need to know about where the organization has been focusing its recruitment efforts. It's always realized that the founder wrote that in order to change society, you need to recruit from the top of society, and so it's targeted senior politicians, senior lawmakers, senior business people, all through its history. And I think you mentioned the McCloskey. McCloskey was this charismatic Opus Dei priest who took over the Catholic Information Center at the heart of Washington D.C. in the 90s and really transformed it into a hub for I guess this crossover between conservative Republican political elite and this kind of rising Christian nationalist ultra Orthodox Catholic movement. And it's this kind of weird yeah, it's a bookshop and a chapel,
Hmm.
but it's
Hmm.
also a meeting point for some of the most influential conservatives in Washington. So on its board, you've got people like Leonard Leo, the guy that orchestrated the conservative takeover of the US Supreme Court. You've got people like Pat Cipollone, who was the White House chief counsel under Donald Trump. You had Bill Barr, the former Attorney General, was also sitting on the board there. One of the regulars at the Catholic Information Center is a guy who might be a name that might be familiar to some of your listeners, Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, the architect of Project 2025. This is a hub. It's a networking point for these people and this network of individuals who are obsessed, for want of a better word, with fighting the progressive agenda and who want to impose their own reactionary agenda on the American people, whether they want it or not.
The thing that I find so, I mean, there's so many fascinating things about this, but one of the great ironies is that, this movement is an occult, what you conspiratorial, by definition, a secretive operation, at the pinnacle really of American power. And the MAGA movement is so obsessed with cults and conspiracies, and yet is completely oblivious, or doesn't care at all about this connection between this kind of secretive movement and Project 2025, which is now being affected on us. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. Talk to me a little bit about where the timing of our conversation here, of course, is because of the death of the progressive Pope Francis and the conclave that we're about to see. Did you see the movie, by the way, The Conclave?
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I assume some of our listeners have seen it. I watched it a few nights ago and I thought it was pretty good. I wasn't interested in it until this happened. But talk to me a little bit about the role that the goals that they are going to have, because some of their cardinals, some of the members of the conclave are actually affiliated, or let's say sympathetic with this sort of regressive movement. What was the relationship to Pope Francis, and what is going to happen now that he's gone, in terms of if the changes that he was trying to effect, and the selection of his replacement.
I mean, Opus Dei had a very difficult relationship with Pope Francis. It's kind of funny. I saw that just today, the head of Opus Dei in the United States has written an op-ed which has been posted in Newsweek talking about how great Pope Francis was, and I was kind of thinking that's a bit rich. Like, I mean, so Pope Francis has been aware of the abuses within Opus Dei for some time, and he has made a number of moves to clean up the organization and to hold it to account. Um, so in 2022, he issued this thing called a motu proprio, which is basically a papal decree. It's a personal edict from the Pope himself. And he basically ordered Opus Dei to get its house in order. He told them to rip up the statutes and to start again, to redraw the statutes. The message was, you guys need to clean up, we need to start afresh. They resisted. They were playing for time. They didn't do what he said. I think the calculation was that the Pope is in his late 80s. He's a sick man. Let's just bide our time here. He might not be around long enough to see through these reforms. A year later, he issued another multi proprio, basically giving them the hurry up. And again, they dragged their feet. Now, what's interesting is that in recent months, Opus Dei have finally been given the hurry up, and they've had a new set of statutes rammed down their throats by the Vatican to um, address, a number of abuses, spiritual abuses, psychological abuse within Opus Dei. This abusive cult at the heart of the church, and Opus Dei was due to vote on these new statutes next week. Now,
Wow.
when the Pope passed away on Monday, within 24 hours of the Pope's death, the vote was cancelled.
Mm.
So Opus Dei will now not vote on these new statutes that were drawn up by Francis's Vatican. Um, it looks like once again the Opus Dei is playing for time. They're hoping that the next pope will be more amenable. So that strategy of dragging their feet, resisting reform, um, seems to have been semi-successful. I mean, it all depends now on who's elected at the conclave.
Mhm.
Um,
And how is that? I mean, are they pushing somebody? Do you know if there's a likelihood that they're going to have a pope that's more friendly to them? Are they obviously they want that, but what are the chances that that's going to happen? That they're going to have a regressive pope? Is there enough sense of backlash coming to the progressive moves of Francis? Uh,
I mean, publicly, they obviously aren't advocating any particular candidate, but I'm sure in private they are.
Mhm.
You know, there's this thing called the pre-conclave that happens. All the cardinals will be in Rome already for the funeral tomorrow, and the conclave, there'll be a kind of there'll be a gap between the funeral and the conclave, and during that period, which is called the pre-conclave, there's all kinds of meetings going on, all kinds of horse trading, backroom deals. For watch conclave, you'll see, you'll see. I mean, it's while the I don't want to spoil. I don't want to give any spoilers. While the ending is maybe a little bit far fetched, the process itself is pretty accurate, and that's this is. It's a secret vote. The votes themselves get burned after each vote, so there's no record of who voted how, and everything is held behind closed doors. The cardinals are sworn to secrecy. We'll never really know what went on inside. Um,
It's fascinating. The movie is actually really prescient in its, I don't know how, they saw this coming, but it had to be a couple of years ago that they made it. They wrote it, and it's about this clash between the progressives and the regressives in this global church system. And yeah, I recommend it. We only have 5 more minutes, and there are a couple more things I want to get to. The They're American members, or not members, but American cardinals who and bishops who are sympathetic to this movement, who were very anti-Francis, and I'm thinking particularly about Cardinal Burke and Vigiano, who of course is an American, but who they sent over here. Um, and I'm just wondering if you could explain, like, what is it about these guys? This is going to sound like a silly question, but like, why do they so love dressing up like royals? Like he actually he told them to stop wearing some of those things, and that was one of the things that made them so mad. That and having to give communion to divorced Americans, which is, not, they don't want to do it. I mean, that's really why they're fighting against him. They were fighting against him. But I mean, what is up with this sort of pomp, the love of pomp and circumstance among these men? The whole, the watered silk trains and the jeweled hats, and that they just don't want to give it up. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I've never tried these silk gowns or these jewels. I mean, maybe there's something in it. I don't know, but
And the red
I mean,
shoes.
it
I mean,
makes
Leonard
me.
Leo, Leonard Leo loves being part of the Knights of Malta, and it's the same
Yes, and
thing.
he whenever he goes to a formal dinner, he wears this medal he has from the. I guess it makes them feel important. I think it's as simple as that, right? I mean, it makes these people feel important, um, and yeah, I mean. coming back to the US, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there have been a number of people affiliated to Opus Dei, people like Leonard Leo and Tim Bush, have also been linked.
Tim Bush, for our listeners, is a California real estate magnate who is extremely influential now in the trad movement. And JD Vance has spent a lot of time at his vineyard. He makes wines in addition to selling real estate or making money off that. He makes wines that he names after the Madonna, right?
Yeah, no,
Red
absolutely.
California Reds.
Yes. So I spoke to him for the book, and he basically said Francis is doing all of this awful stuff to us. But I think I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, "I don't think he's going to have time to complete his work." Um, and so I think with the death, I mean, obviously, I think people are sad to see the passing of a pope, even arch conservatives. But I think there's probably something there as well that are like, this is our opportunity. But you know what? I don't think maybe I'm being naive or optimistic here, but I don't think they have the numbers.
Mm.
Um, there are about 130 men that will vote on the next pope, 130 cardinals, and I think about 110 of them were personally appointed by Pope Francis. And
Mm.
so, I mean, they aren't all necessarily going to be on the same page as Pope Francis on every issue. But if he appointed them, you can be pretty much guaranteed that they're at least at the kind of progressive end. So it's highly unlikely, I think, that they're going to vote for an arch conservative radical pope. But who knows? I mean, when in 1978, when the conclave was held, the second conclave within like a month because Pope John Paul I passed within 30 days, was found dead in his bed within 30 days of becoming Pope. When they convened again to elect, they had 7 rounds of voting and they were completely deadlocked. And the guy they chose, this Polish Archbishop, who would become John Paul II, he was a complete outsider. No one was expecting the election of this guy. And he absolutely transformed the church, pushed it, you know, to way to the right, became really authoritarian. I mean, he's the great savior of many of these arch conservative Catholics. People like Tim Bush, Leonard Leo. They all look up Opus Dei. Absolutely looks up to John Paul II, and
Mhm.
so I guess they may not have the numbers, but there is an outside chance that the conclave will be so deadlocked that they'll, like they did in '78, they'll choose an outside candidate who's an unknown component. I mean, I don't think when John Paul II was elected, people had a proper grasp of what his politics were, and they kind of only became apparent once he became pope.
Like
And
a
so there
sleeper.
is,
Hmm.
yes, I mean, yes, so there is a risk that something similar could happen, but I'm optimistic.
Well, I'm going to end it on that note because we've hit the half-hour mark, and I think that's we could go on and on about this, but I'm so grateful for you coming on and for all the work that you did because it's a really important look at the kind of the kernel of this movement that really has taken over our legal system at the top, not the whole legal system, but in Washington, and a broad swath of our politics. And as you said, Kevin Roberts, Heritage Foundation, JD Vance is affiliated. Peter Thiel has some connections. It's an occult operation. Oh, there's one last thing I want to say. When we talk about this, we're criticizing them. What I get back is, oh, you're anti-Catholic.
Mhm.
Just, there is this anti-Catholic sentiment in American politics that goes a long way back, right? And what is your answer to that when people say, oh, this is just, you're just picking on this this institution that also does so much good in the world? What is your answer to that?
Well, look, if criticizing Opus Dei makes me anti-Catholic, then I guess Pope Francis must be anti-Catholic as well. I mean, it's it, it's lazy.
Hmm.
That kind of argument is used by people who don't want to engage with the details of the abuse and the clear abuse and manipulation at the heart of this movement. And so, whenever someone says that, it's lazy, and it doesn't really warrant any response, I think.
Well, we're not lazy. We have to keep our eyes open. Thank you so much for the rigor and the time that you put into this, and also facing down. I know a lot of uh, criticism and lots of legal checks and balances there. So thank you so much, everybody listening. Please go out and have a look at his book, Opus, and maybe take a look at the movie before we all go to Rome to see what happens.
Thank you, Nina, for
All
having
right.
me on. It's been a pleasure to talk.
Always. Thank you. And thanks for listening to my first Substack Live. I'll be back next week, I think. Bye.
Bye.